Toyota's decision to redirect its $9 billion battery megafactory from Alabama to Canada was framed as a routine business decision. The company cited operational efficiency and supply chain optimization, standard corporate language. But the timing raises a different question. This announcement came just weeks after Trump's tariff escalation on Canadian goods, and hours after Canada announced major new subsidies for green technology manufacturing. This is no longer just a factory relocation, this is a strategic rejection of Trump's economic environment. Toyota had been in advanced discussions with Alabama officials about constructing a massive battery production facility. $9 billion in investment, thousands of jobs, a project that would have anchored the Southeast's electric vehicle supply chain. Alabama had prepared infrastructure, offered tax incentives, treated it as a done deal. Then the announcement came. Toyota was redirecting the investment to Ontario, Canada, not delaying it, not scaling it back.
Toyota held an unveiling event today in Woodstock for its Canadian-built RAV4. The latest generation model will roll out of southwestern Ontario exclusively hybrid. As Sean Irvin reports, at a time of economic upheaval, Toyota officials are optimistic.
Redirecting it entirely. The official explanation focused on proximity to existing operations and regulatory alignment. Toyota emphasized Canada's battery production ecosystem and workforce availability, legitimate factors, but they don't explain the timing. Alabama had those same disadvantages 6 months ago. Ontario had those same advantages 6 months ago. What changed was the policy environment, and that distinction matters. Here is the sequence. In recent months, Trump imposed sweeping tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and manufactured goods. He threatened additional levies on auto parts. He created uncertainty across North American supply chains. Canadian officials responded not with retaliation, but with strategic investment. Ottawa announced billions in subsidies for battery production, green technology, and advanced manufacturing. They positioned Canada as the stable alternative. Days later, Toyota made its decision. The factory that was destined for Alabama is now going to Ontario. That timeline is not coincidental. That timeline reveals preference. This decision exposes a structural problem in Trump's trade strategy. Tariffs were supposed to make American manufacturing more attractive, pressure foreign companies into building domestically, and create leverage. Instead, they created risk. When a government introduces volatility into trade policy, it doesn't just affect prices. It affects long-term investment decisions. Corporations do not invest $9 billion in environments where rules change unpredictably. They invest where policy is stable, where agreements are reliable, where the future is calculable. Trump's tariff threats made the U.S. less predictable. Canada's subsidy response made Canada more attractive. Toyota did the math. The financial implications are clear. $9 billion in capital investment means construction contracts, supplier agreements, decades of operational spending, and jobs across logistics networks. Alabama was positioned to capture all of that. Now, Ontario will. This is a transfer of industrial capacity that didn't happen because of labor costs or energy prices. It happened because of policy choices. What makes this particularly damaging is the symbolism. Toyota is not politically motivated. It makes decisions to maximize returns and minimize risk. When a corporation of that scale moves a $9 billion project from a red state to Canada, it is making a risk assessment. And that assessment concluded that Trump's America is a worse bet than Carney's Canada. That signal is now being sent to every other multinational considering U.S. investment. Trump built his identity on bringing manufacturing back to America. He promised to end outsourcing, claimed tariffs would force companies to build domestically, and framed himself as the defender of American workers. Yet here is Toyota, choosing Canada over Alabama. A $9 billion megafactory that was within reach, now redirected across the border. This is concrete economic loss, directly traceable to the uncertainty Trump's trade war created. Republican officials in Alabama now face constituent pressure. Local leaders are explaining the reversal. None can publicly blame Trump's tariffs without breaking party loyalty, but privately, frustration is mounting. Congressional Republicans cannot openly criticize his trade policy without alienating his base, yet cannot ignore major investments leaving their states. Some are quietly pushing for tariff exemptions. The pressure is building as midterm elections approach. Meanwhile, Canada is celebrating. Mark Carney now has a $9 billion talking point. He did not attack Trump or escalate. He simply created a more attractive investment environment, and Toyota responded. This is precisely the contrast Carney has been building. While Trump creates chaos, Canada offers certainty. While Washington deploys threats, Ottawa deploys subsidies. While one government destabilizes, the other stabilizes. That strategic difference is now worth $9 billion. This fits a broader pattern. Multiple corporations have delayed or redirected U.S. investments due to tariff uncertainty. Each decision represents capital not flowing into American communities, weakening the industrial base Trump claims to be strengthening. Tariffs were supposed to create leverage. Instead, they created friction, and friction drives investment elsewhere. The political consequences extend beyond economics. Trump's base includes manufacturing-heavy states like Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, Michigan, places where factory jobs matter not just economically, but culturally. When a $9 billion factory expected to anchor a region's future goes to Canada instead, that is not just a news story, that is a lived loss. Voters in those communities will remember who was in charge when it happened. Trump can blame corporations, Canada, or globalism, but the factory is still going to Ontario. The jobs are still not coming to Alabama. What Trump cannot afford is for this to become a pattern. If more mega projects choose Canada over the U.S., the narrative shifts permanently from tough trade policy to failed trade policy. And once that perception takes hold, it becomes nearly impossible to reverse. Because investors move based on track records, not promises. And Trump's track record now includes a $9 billion factory that chose Canada. That is not rhetoric. That is documented economic loss. Mark Carney won this by being more predictable, not louder. He promised stability, not just subsidies. He outcompeted Trump on policy reliability. That is a devastating contrast. It suggests the problem is not state-level incentives or workforce quality. The problem is White House unpredictability. Corporations cannot plan around governing by tariff threat and social media announcement. So they go elsewhere. This is what happens when economic policy becomes performance. Trump treated tariffs as strength and assumed pressure would force compliance. But compliance is not investment. Investment requires certainty. Trump offered volatility. Carney offered stability. Toyota made the rational choice. Trump claimed tariffs would bring manufacturing home, that companies would have no choice but to build in America. Yet Toyota had a choice, and it chose Canada. Tariffs alone do not drive investment decisions. When deployed erratically, they become a deterrent. This is not speculation. This is outcome. $9 billion just moved north. If Trump were operating from strength, this loss would be manageable, but he is not. His approval ratings have declined. His tariff strategy faces legal challenges. Republican defections on trade votes are increasing. Business groups are expressing concern. In that environment, losing a $9 billion factory to Canada is not just an economic setback. It is a political vulnerability. This story will not disappear. $9 billion is too large to ignore. Alabama is a state Trump needs. The contrast with Canada is too stark. Every time Carney highlights new investment, every time Ontario celebrates job creation, every time Toyota begins construction across the border, it reminds American voters of what was lost. That is sustained damage. And Trump has no good response. He cannot claim victory. He cannot blame Democrats. The factory is in Canada. The decision is final. Toyota attempted to invest in America. Instead, it is investing in Canada. Trump attempted to use tariffs as leverage. Instead, he created an environment that drives capital away. The Megafactory was supposed to be a win for Alabama. Now it is a win for Ontario. That shift did not happen by accident. It happened because policy choices have consequences. And sometimes those consequences are $9 billion and thousands of jobs. If serious policy analysis matters, if understanding how power and capital actually move matters, then this story matters. It shows what happens when strategy is replaced by performance. Because sometimes the real story is not what was promised, it is what was lost.